Cardinal Turkson, I'll abbreviate my introduction, of course, because to give him the time, is a native of Ghana, was ordained a priest at the age of 27, spent some time in Ghana after that, considerable time in various offices and promoting various good things, but a great deal of time in Rome in his 43-year career since he was ordained as a priest. John Paul II appointed him Archbishop of Cape Coast in Ghana in 92, and in 93 created him a cardinal, and he was then the first cardinal from his native country of Ghana. Throughout his career, he's impressed his associates with his sanctity, his intelligence, and his ability to guide complex negotiations and other projects to successful conclusions. 2009, Pope Benedict XVI appointed Cardinal Turkson the president of the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace, which is a very influential group that came into being with Vatican II and has emphasized and brought to a point the Church's specific engagement with social issues, and Cardinal Turkson guided that council very well. It has been a major force, and since it was established as part of the actions of John the 23rd. In 2017, Pope Francis created the Dicastery for the promotion of integral human development. If you don't know what Dicastery is, you have to look it up on Google. But it's actually like a council, one of the parts of the Curia, which is the body through which the Pope governs the Roman Catholic Church. And integral human development is a major theme of the Encyclical and an idea totally important, totally emphasized by Cardinal Turkson. He's had the confidence of the last three popes and has done a great deal as a result of his devotion to the teachings of the Church, in his care for the poor, and in his sensitivity for environmental problems. So I now will get out of the way, and as I said, I'm not going to bring this talk to an end, so. Where are you going? I'll just go and sit in the audience so I can look at you.
So my dear friends, I like first to express my deepest apologies for coming late and with my lateness disrupting the program, the beautiful program that you had planned for this afternoon. I apologize, but I apologize because I cannot put the blame where it really belongs. And that's why I apologize. No, all of this had been planned and fixed already. I knew I was going to travel early and get here last night. And as happens very often in the way we work in the Vatican, I got a chance to meet the Pope, and I said, Holy Father, when can I come and discuss some office matters with you? And then he says, I'll give you a call. And so the call came Friday afternoon and said, can you come tomorrow at 10 o'clock, which would have been Saturday at 10 o'clock. I kind of, so this was a Monsignor, not the Pope himself. I said, wow, I was going to be traveling tomorrow at 9:40 already. Is it possible to start earlier? Just okay, then leave it when you come back. Then on second thought, I said, gee, let's see whether we can postpone, reschedule the flight so I can take care of the audience with the Holy Father. So that's what we try to do. And it would have worked perfectly well, but for ignorance that I had about traveling through Canada. Apparently, if you travel Air Canada and need to transit to the United States, you need to travel with a transit visa. And I didn't know that. So I got to the airport early enough to board the plane, and they said, do you have a transit visa? And of course, I didn't have a transit visa, so they said, then you cannot board the plane. So that's where everything became a little bit complicated. But I'm still glad. I'm still very grateful for the patience that the organizers of this program have had, and for still having me here. So the moderator said he didn't have the power to stop a prince of the church. I think he's got all the power to do anything that he wants to do. In any case, I think by common understanding, I'm just supposed to just make a few comments for about 15 minutes, and then I think we'll go on with the rest of the program. And then tomorrow morning, God willing, I can give my talk. So the occasion for our gathering here is about climate change. But when we have the occasion to talk about climate change, we widen the scope a little bit. Because the talk about climate change becomes meaningful only when it is placed in the general context of ecology and the challenges of ecology. Taken out of ecology, it just appears to be just one small thing we're looking at. But climate change belongs to ecology and belongs to everything that is happening to our climate or to creation as our home. And so the encyclical that Pope Francis wrote in 2015, Laudato Si, care for our common home, is about that. And since the encyclical was published, the very many times that I've had opportunity to present it at the United Nations, in Paris, at COP21, and several other events, I've always had to bring the issue back. At the United Nations, the interest was about climate change and global warming. So they say, now that Pope Francis has written an encyclical about global warming and climate change, and I found a need again to say, no, Pope Francis has not written an encyclical on global warming and climate change. He's written an encyclical about integral ecology. And it's the placing this in this broader context is very useful and very meaningful. It gives, the talk about climate change derives all its force and power from this broader concept of integral ecology. Because climate change we can talk about, but it's a very transversal theme. We don't talk about climate change just limiting ourselves to the temperature changes and how the barometer or the thermometer reads and how the weathers are getting extreme and all of that. Climate change is also related with human health, its impact on health, its relationship with poverty situations, its relationship with certain arid conditions of the earth, which is now causing the big migration crisis. So it's a very transversal theme. And that's why sometimes it's useful to discuss climate change and this broader concept. So for tonight, for the 15 minutes that I have, I'd like to make your visit and your coming here very useful, in the sense that I wish that all of you, first let me ask, so how many have read Laudato Si? Wow, it's a good class. It's a good class that does its homework. So you know the encyclical very well. Otherwise, when I have an opportunity to present it and present in a very short, concise way, I try to give the audience something to go away with. And since in the Catholic Church, the number 7 is very popular with a lot of things, 7 sacraments, 7 corporal works of mercy, and all of that. We've also described 7 characteristics of this encyclical, which enables us to kind of have the encyclical on our fingertips. We've identified 7 crucial features or characteristics of this encyclical, with which we can pretty much go talk about it anywhere to whatever audience. Of course, the details can always be supplied. So this evening, saving the big lecture about the gospel of creation for tomorrow, I just want to present these 7 characteristics of Laudato Si, So living here, you can all live with 7 and everything 7 and everything 7 and keep talking about 7. So there's 7 features are very interesting because they help us even think about things that even sometimes after reading Laudato Si, the encyclical, from cover to cover, still do not readily emerge. We can identify 7 C's, the letter C. C as in Charles. We can identify 7 C's which characterize pretty much the content of this encyclical, and which enables us to gain a certain type of general brief, general understanding of this encyclical, but which also shows what the encyclical is and some other implications of this encyclical. The first C we can talk about is the C of the letter continuity. C for continuity. And when we talk about C for continuity in Laudato Si, it is simply to say that if the big teaching of Laudato Si is about integral ecology, Pope Francis is by no means the first pope to talk about ecology. In teaching ecology in Laudato Si, Pope Francis is teaching in continuity with his predecessors. He's taken up a theme that his predecessors have already talked about, and he's bringing it all together. So, when Rerum Novarum with Pope Leo XIII was written, it was about the industrial age and the challenges of labor conditions of a lot of workers. But already then, Pope Leo XIII dropped a hint that we cannot progress far without paying attention to the environment in which we live. That was a small hint, but it was still dropped. Then after Pope Leo XIII, Pope John the 23rd, in his encyclical Pacem in Terris, you remember that from the Cold War period, Pope John the 23rd in Pacem in Terris talking about peace in the world, a big part of this encyclical was promoting relations and how you can solve a lot of things with good relations and the development of relations. Nevertheless, Pope John the 23rd also have a way of talking about the fact that everything that we do, include education as well as our concern for the environment, must be holistic. He suggested that we develop a holistic way of looking at the human person and all the features which affect his life. So integral, holistic, that came with Pope John the 23rd. After Pope John the 23rd came Pope Paul VI with a big encyclical Populorum Progressio. You know, these are the 2 popes of the Second Vatican Council and the big things that they desired for the church and for humanity. But Pope Paul VI, having taken over, so having concluded the council after John the 23rd, found himself heading and leading the church in a period of the emergence of a lot of free independent states around the world. The 60s were when most countries in Africa became independent and a lot of countries in Southeast Asia. It was the era of independence around the world. So as countries emerged from colonialism into independence, the problem of development became crucial. How do emerging independent countries carry on the task of development? How do they ensure that? And for Pope Paul VI, it was a moment to talk about development and natural resources. How do we establish the balance between the two so that natural resources do not suffer from development and that development is not also held back by natural resources after Paul VI has said the new name of peace is actually development. So after Paul VI, talking then about development and biodiversity, natural resources, then so first time started talking about natural ecology. they need to be conscious of, and they need to care for our natural environment with its biodiversity and all its endowments so it can support human existence. Benedict, following John Paul II, following Paul VI, developed further the theme of natural ecology, but then added another aspect and said that natural ecology is not complete and meaningful without the talk about human ecology. It's not only the natural world that needs a suitable environment to develop in, but the human person itself also needs a suitable suitable moral environment to also develop in profitably. So Pope John Paul II, you probably recall all his big writings about the theology of the body and all of that. Pope John Paul II was for the moral environment in which a person's development becomes successful and becomes ensured and safeguarded. So with his days, we talk then about natural ecology and then now human ecology. After John Paul II came Benedict. Benedict, in Caritas in Veritate, his encyclical, takes up the theme of development again. Takes up the theme of development, deepens it, and now begins to talk about the need not only for concern for natural ecology or concern for human ecology, but there should be concern also for the social ecology and then ecology of peace. So with Benedict, we talk about 4 ecologies: natural ecology, human ecology, social ecology, and ecology of peace. These then would be what Pope Francis would put together in what is now presented in Laudato Si as integral ecology. Ecology about all of these concerns about human life. So in Laudato Si, concerns about natural ecology is interwoven with concerns about human ecology. The Pope Francis has come up with this big saying that everything is interconnected. And the interconnectedness of issues just invite us to look at things not in piecemeal manner, but in their totality. And that is the integral ecology that Pope Francis talks about it. So the C, the first C of continuity, is inviting readers of this to recognize how Pope Francis is an heir to a very rich tradition of teachings by his predecessors and coming into this. So integral ecology look for its roots in the past, in the teaching of the past popes. The second C we can talk about, 15 minutes, right? We can't go this way with 15 minutes. 5 more minutes, so we have to go very fast. So we will not be as detailed as this first C. So the second C is the C of collegiality. Collegiality. Collegiality is when the Pope does stuff with other bishops around the world. A college, the Pope in college with the other bishops and cardinals around the world. And collegiality is an issue in this encyclical because normally when popes write documents, they quote previous popes. Laudato Si is unique in the way it quotes episcopal conferences. Not only popes, but episcopal, what bishops around the world say or are saying about the issue of ecology. So the quote then of episcopal conferences is the thing about collegiality. It's as if the Pope wants to say, I'm teaching this with all of you bishops around the world. Quotes from Bishop Conference South Africa, the Philippines, New Zealand, United States, Brazil, Colombia, Canada. All the very bishops' conferences are quoted. They are the Pope teaching with the bishops' conference. And when I have a chance to say this, then I say that if the Pope reached down to bishops to prepare this text, then with its publication, it's now time for bishops to reach up to the Pope to teach this with the Pope. This is how collegiality works. Collegiality is not one way. It's not only when the Pope reaches down to bishops, but it's also when the bishops rise up to their task of teaching with the Holy Father. So the Pope has done his part. We invite bishops to do their part, to teach this with the Holy Father. The third is the C of conversation or dialogue. C of conversation. Anybody who's looked at Laudato Si has been struck by how often the Pope calls for dialogue, conversation. He says that we face a global issue. And facing a global complex issue, all of us must come together with the different points of views and ideas we have to solve a common issue, a common problem that we all face. So they said that the third C is about the C of conversation. Come, let us talk together, find a solution to this. And if it is conversation, what is it about? The conversation is about the fourth C, which is care. Care for creation. The C of care. Before Laudato Si, we were used to talking about man's relationship with the environment in terms of stewardship. Okay, in terms of stewardship. Pope Francis uses stewardship only twice in this encyclical. For the rest, the way he describes our relationship with the environment is in terms of a care, in terms of care, as if, care is more compassionate, it is more sympathetic. You cannot care for something without showing compassion, without being truly, involved with the issues. So care is a big thing in this encyclical. Care for creation, care for our common home. And tomorrow we'll have a chance to talk about this, the content of this care, a little bit more. But that is the fourth C. Now, with having care for our common home, then the discussion begins. The Pope then suggests that when we have care, we recognize what we've done, then there must be a change. And the change is about ecological conversion. Let us switch gears. Let us begin to do things differently. Let us change, habits and lifestyles and all of that. So ecological conversion is the fifth C that the encyclical talks about. We need to change ways, behavior, change lifestyle. And one of the changes the Pope talks about, which is not popular here in the United States, especially in Texas, is when he talks about air conditions. Then not too many people want to hear about air conditioning in the summer. But that's one of the things. So ecological conversion, change, is the fifth C the Pope talks about. But then as he says at least twice in this encyclical, when you want people to do things or to change them, you must give them motivation. You must motivate them to do things or to change. And so the way the Pope comes up, talks about motivating humanity for this ecological conversion, is his talk about educating people in ecological citizenship. Ecological citizenship is a new thing the Pope thinks we should be educated about. That we are ecologically, if you want, citizens, and ecological citizenship is something that we must all feel to be able to accept responsibility for what is happening on the earth. So ecological citizenship is the sixth C the Pope calls upon us to embrace. And education in ecological citizenship is his way of motivating people for conversion. The last C is something that strikes everybody who picks up Laudato Si. The title itself is prayer. Laudato Si, may you be praised, O Lord. Taking that thing from St. Francis. And the encyclical concludes with two prayers at the end of it. So prayers form the frames around this encyclical. And in this encyclical, the Holy Father, quoting his namesake, Pope Francis, St. Francis, refers to the habit of St. Francis about talking about creation and appreciating creation, everything about creation. So the seventh C, which inspires this encyclical, is the C of contemplation. Pope Francis in this encyclical invites us to let creation speak to us about God, its creator. And the elements of creation lead us to worship and adore God, the creator. So contemplation is a thing that this encyclical invites us to do. It does not simply begin and end with prayer, but the content of it all is, since, as we ourselves say in Psalm 19, the heavens declare the glory of God, okay? So the nature reveals God. And Pope Francis wants us to have nature or creation not only reveal God to us, but enable us also to pray, to pray to God. So the sea of contemplation. So these, my dear friends, are 7 C's with which you can live this, church or this chapel. And whenever you're mad or you're angry, you can just say 7. Continuity, conversion, and all of that. And so you're now all experts in Laudato Si, having the 7 C's to pretty much capture the content of the encyclical. Its central message is developed in continuity with other popes. In its development, Pope Francis quotes a lot other episcopal conferences, collegiality. And in so doing, the Pope calls us all to conversation. Let us dialogue, let us talk together. And tomorrow in the term about gospel of creation, he begins by saying that here we're talking about the encyclical is meant to be, to be listened to by people who are Christians and non-Christians. So why talk specifically about the gospel of creation? And then he says, because of the nature of the situation, we must be open to all points of views, to listen to the riches of all traditions to help us settle this. Dialogue, conversation, and if we're dialoguing and conversing, what is it about? It's about how to care for our common home. And when we struck and we were impressed by the need to care for our common home, Pope Francis said we cannot do this without changing, without some act of conversion, without changing lifestyle. So ecological conversion is the thing. And to stimulate and motivate and encourage us to convert, he talks about education, ecological citizenship. That's what we all are. As inhabitants of this earth, we all ecologically citizens of this earth. And then the last bit, it's about contemplation, how creation leads us to God and enables us to pray and communicate with God. So thank you for this quick rundown. We've beaten our 5 minutes, okay? And I hope something stays with you.